Welcome everyone to today's class. I am Dr. Jayashree, taking today's class on the topic skeletal muscle relaxants. So first, why are we studying about this skeletal muscle relaxants? What is the use? Mainly, they are clinically used as adjuvant to surgical anesthesia to obtain the relaxation of skeletal muscles of abdominal wall muscles or lower limbs, etc. during surgery and minimize the risk of cardiovascular and respiratory depression due to anesthesia and shorten the post anesthesia recovery period of the patient. And other uses is like it is also used as antispasmodics or vasodilators or bronchodilators. Now coming to the main topic, this is a basic physiology of a skeletal muscle contraction. Very brief. So see, as you can see here, this is a neuron which is supplying this skeletal muscle. So what is happening here? This is a junction, neuromuscular junction. In the neuromuscular junction, these are the synaptic vesicles and these contain the acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter. This neurotransmitter is released into this motor end plate and this synapse. And in the synapse, after it gets released, it acts on the receptors on the motor end plate. See here it is again enlarged, and here you can see these are the receptors. In the like this acetylcholine will be attaching to this neuromuscular receptor, due to which this sodium influx happens, and further this contraction, excitation, coupling, everything will be following this process. So this is the main like you have to remember for the further discussion of the skeletal muscle relaxants. Moving on. Now classification. Classification of the skeletal muscle relaxants. You have to read and by heart you have to remember the whole classification, the further slides. So based on their site and mechanism of action, these skeletal muscle relaxants are classified into following: peripherally acting, centrally acting, directly acting, and miscellaneous muscle relaxants. And in peripheral acting muscle relaxants, again, non-depolarizing and depolarizing. Non-depolarizing blockers. Non-depolarizing blockers are also called as competitive blockers. In this, again, they are divided into long-acting, intermediate acting, and short-acting. And all the three are again divided into isoquinoline derivatives, steroidal derivatives. Isoquinoline derivatives in long-acting are D-tubocurarine, metocurine, doxacurium. D-tubocurarine is a prototype of this whole non-depolarizing blockers, and steroidal derivatives pancuronium, pipecuronium, and intermediate acting isoquinoline derivatives atracurium, cis-atracurium, steroidal derivatives vecuronium, rocuronium. Short acting isoquinoline derivatives mivacurium, steroidal derivatives rapacuronium. Coming to depolarizing blockers, also called as persistent depolarizers. This only one drug is in use. It is succinylcholine. Now coming to centrally acting muscle relaxants, also called spasmolytics. Mefenicin group, carisoprodol, chlorzoxazone, chlormazanone, and methocarbamol. Benzodiazepine group, diazepam, clonazepam. GABA derivative, baclofen. Central alpha-2 agonist, tizanidine. Miscellaneous agents, tolperisone HCl. Directly acting muscle relaxants, dantrolene, and miscellaneous muscle relaxants, quinine, botulinum toxins A and B, gabapentin, progabine, riluzole, idrosulamide. Now coming to non-depolarizing blockers, also called as competitive blockers. The very first neuromuscular blocking drug that was found was Curare. This Curare was used by native hunters of South America to paralyze animals while hunting. See in this diagram, just to show you how they use that Curare. They actually apply to the arrow, that end of the arrow, and they blow through this pipe. That arrow will go and attack that animal and paralyzes it. Then depending on that Curare, then they discovered this prototype drug. They invented this prototype drug in 1940s or so. That is D-tubocurarine, and I told you this is the prototype drug of non-depolarizing blockers. How is it acting? What is the mechanism of action is they block this neuromuscular receptor, due to which there is no like binding of acetylcholine to the neuromuscular receptor. Earlier we saw in the diagram, like on the neuromuscular receptor, the acetylcholine should get attached to open the sodium channel. Through the sodium channel, like that potential will be like produced, end plate potential. But what is happening here, it is preventing. So there is an absence of end plate potential, due to which it cannot elicit any muscle contraction. Henceforth, that skeletal muscle will be relaxed. This is a mechanism of action. This blockade of the receptor is a competitive blockade. Like if it is like in a higher concentration, it will be blocking it, but it can also be like surmounted, can be removed by more amount of any other antagonist of the D-tubocurarine, like neostigmine, for example. So it is a competitive blockade. More the amount, effectively it will be blocking this receptor. Coming to pharmacokinetics, these are quaternary compounds, and these are polar and remain ionized at physiological pH, due to which they are not absorbed orally. So they are given intravenously, and they have very small, like smaller volume of distribution. Except for atracurium, none of the drugs crosses blood-brain barrier, and none of the drugs crosses the placental barrier also. Excuse me. None crosses the placental barrier. So it is safe to give during pregnancy. Coming to elimination of the drugs, usually all the non-depolarizing blockers, some of them are eliminated by kidney, some of them are eliminated by liver, plasma cholinesterase, or Hoffman elimination. So the drugs which are getting eliminated by the kidney usually have longer duration of action. Example, D-tubocurarine, doxycurium, pancuronium. And those drugs which are being eliminated by liver have shorter or intermediate duration of action. Example, vecuronium, rocuronium. And those drugs which are being eliminated, degraded by this plasmacholinesterase, have even shorter duration of action. Example, mevacurium. And Hoffman elimination is what is this Hoffman elimination is? The structural arrangement of whatever drug is there, it will be deranged, it will be modified, due to which they get inactivated spontaneously. Example of the drugs which are being eliminated by this are heteracurium, cis-heteracurium. Now coming to pharmacodynamics of these drugs. These drugs cause skeletal muscle paralysis. How are they causing? Like progressive flaccid paralysis. Here what they do is they affect the smaller muscles first, like the muscles around eyes and toes and larynx. They are affected the first. Then the larger muscles like the trunk muscles, limb muscles are affected. Later, the intercostal muscles are affected. And in the end, the diaphragm is also affected, which may lead to respiratory depression. This is how the progressively it causes skeletal muscle paralysis. Coming to like histamine release, these drugs also releases histamine from the mast cells. Here, this is the order of how they affect the release. D-tuberculin and metocurine are more, they releases more histamine from the mast cells, and doxycurium, mimacurium, etracurium, cis-etracurium are moderately releases. And steroidal derivatives are like very rare, very less quantity is released. Coming to ganglionic and cardiac muscarinic receptor blockade, there is partial or no blockade at all. But the drug pancuronium, it has vagolytic effects due to which it can cause tachycardia. Coming to cardiovascular effects, due to the histamine release which is being caused, it might cause hypotension. And respiratory effects, this also is due to histamine release. It can cause bronchospasm, but not very, not that common. And GIT effects, these decrease the tone and motility of intestine. What happens if tone and motility of intestine is decreased? That bulk later, it might cause constipation. Coming to adverse effects are hypoxia and respiratory paralysis. Why? Because of the skeletal muscle paralysis, we saw how it is like if it is taken for a prolonged duration in a larger amounts, what happens in the end, it will also affect the intercostal muscles and diaphragm, which can cause respiratory paralysis and hypoxia. And hypotension, we saw the bronchospasm and hypotension are caused by the histamine release. If the drug is taken more, like it can cause this hypotension and bronchospasm and constipation because of the decrease in tone and motility of the intestine. So reversal of blockade in case the depolarizing blockers are taken in excess. If the blockade caused by them, how how can be released in case of any poisoning, like that curare, like we saw how that curare is used as poison. In those cases, we need to reverse the blockade. So what are the drugs which are used for the reversal of blockade are neostigmine, pyridostigmine, and these how they are acting is they are inhibiting the true acetylcholine esterases. These true acetylcholine esterases also what they normally degrade the normal physiological acetylcholine, but what happens here is they also like happens due to which like there is decreased degradation of acetylcholine. So there will be increased amount of acetylcholine getting stuck there in synapse, due to which there is direct there is competitive, we already saw that it is a competitive blockade. So when there is more acetylcholine, it might like go and attach to the that neuromuscular nicotinic receptor, and this also acts like direct nicotinic action at motor end plate also can happen. And this third drug, Sugamadex, this is a new drug which is still in need to be approved. Uh, this acts specifically on the steroidal derivatives of the non-depolarizing blockers. And now synergists and antagonists of the non-depolarizing blockers. Anticholinesterase agents like neostigmine, pyridostigmine, they antagonize the blockers, that non-depolarizing blockers. And hypothermia. Hypothermia is decrease in temperature, can also antagonize. And inhalational general anesthetics, all antibiotics, local anesthetics, myasthenia, and local anesthetics. These three acts synergistically with the non-depolarizing blockers. And in the condition myasthenia gravis, which is an autoimmune disorder, it increases the action. Augments means it increases the action of the neuromuscular blocker. And in conditions like burns or upper motor neuron disease, this requires larger doses of drug. Coming to depolarizing blockers. Depolarizing blockers are also called persistent depolarizers. Here only succinylcholine is in use. And how is it acting on the skeletal muscles? This mechanism of action usually happens under two phases. That is phase 1 blockade, phase 2 blockade. What happens here is in phase 1 blockade, the succinylcholine acts similar to the acetylcholine. This is an analog actually. This succinylcholine is an analog of acetylcholine. So similarly, it acts on the neuromuscular junction and it persistently depolarizes, like continuously giving stimulus to the muscle. So what happens is like depolarizing continuously, the muscle continuously twitches. Like first fasciculations happen, like fasciculations means minor twitching. These twitchings happens continuously, later leading to the flaccid paralysis. And this phase 1 blockade takes a lot of time to turn into phase 2 blockade. But when this phase 2 blockade happens, here there is desensitization of that neuromuscular receptors. And so these nicotinic receptors gets desensitized because there is a continuous stimulation due to which they gets desensitized. And later, like the sodium gate, like we can see, I will show you in the diagram. Here, this or like both non-depolarizing and depolarizing blockers are being given in this diagram. This is a normal stimulus, like this is the acetylcholine. This will be attached on this nicotinic receptor, due to which what happens is the gate like here will be opened, and due to which that channel will be open and sodium will be going inside. But what happens in with non-depolarizing blocker is this will be attached. See here, this you can see this yellow round circle spheres. These will be attached to the receptor, due to which acetylcholine cannot be attached. This is the competitive blockade. We saw that non-depolarizing blockers, so they do the competitive blockade, because of which what happens, this have no effect on this channel. The channel remains closed. But in the this condition is in the case of depolarizing blockers. Depolarizing blockers, they actually continuously they act like acetylcholine. They will keep on depolarizing, but at condition at some point, what happens is due to continuous stimulation of the muscle, it will stop, like the receptors get desensitized, and also they will that gate will be blocked. The channel will be open, but it will be blocked. The sodium will not be entering anymore. This is the phase 2 blockade, due to which that muscle will be relaxed later. Like initially there will be fasciculation, but later after the desensitization, it will be relaxed. The pharmacokinetics of excuse me. These drugs, depolarizing blockers are also quaternary compound. That is succinylcholine is also quaternary compound, and this is also not absorbed if given orally, and doesn't cross any blood-brain barrier or placental barrier. Administered IV, 0.75 to 1.5 milligrams per kg intravenously. And this succinylcholine is rapidly hydrolyzed by plasma pseudocholinesterase. This is like it is not being hydrolyzed by the true cholinesterase. It is a plasma pseudocholinesterase, due to which there is a very brief duration of action, that is 5 to 10 minutes. But there is a condition where there is a genetic variation in pseudocholinesterase. It is called atypical pseudocholinesterase. This leads to impaired degradation of succinylcholine, due to which that succinylcholine will be there for longer time in the body, which might cause succinylcholine apnea. So this is usually in the patients before going for anesthesia, in the like pre-anesthetic checkup, etc. They are assessed by this Debukine number. This Debukine number is normally 80, but if it is decreased, they should be assessed. This Debukine is a local anesthetic. This Debukine normally inhibits normal enzyme, which is normal pseudocholinesterase by 80% and atypical by 20%. But when this Debukine number is assessed, if that this is less than 80%, then it should be checked. Coming to pharmacodynamics. After single IV dose, fasciculations appears over chest and abdomen briefly. Here you can see the muscles on chest and abdomen. And what we saw with the non-depolarizing blockers, their smaller muscles are affected first, like around the eye and the toes, larynx, etc. But here, this larger muscles like chest and abdomen are like affected, but here fasciculations are appearing, but very briefly. After that, complete relaxation will be achieved within 1 to 2 minutes and again disappears within 5 to 10 minutes. Then this paralysis starts. This paralysis, how it progresses is from neck. It will be starting neck, limbs, face, trunk, and in the end, respiratory musculature. So this is how it will be affecting the skeletal muscle. Coming to cardiovascular system, normally first, initially it is causing bradycardia, then tachycardia, then hypertension. Now coming to adverse effects of the depolarizing blockers. Hyperkalemia. Why is this hyperkalemia caused is when this there is a persistent depolarization, there is also efflux of potassium into the plasma. That is like efflux is coming outside, because of which it might cause hyperkalemia, and it should be monitored because it might be a serious situation if either a patient having uremia or the patient is affected by burns. It might be get severe. It might even cause cardiac arrhythmia and death also. Then malignant hypothermia. Malignant hypothermia is normally a genetic condition which is there is a defective release of calcium into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So when the succinylcholine is acting, it continuously depolarizing, which can cause an increased release of calcium into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which can cause an increased lactic acid production and increase in the temperature. This is called malignant hypothermia, which is also a serious condition. And masseter muscle rigidity, this should be observed. This is also a genetic condition. This it can be a problem, like in cases of endotracheal intubation conditions, which masseter muscle rigidity might cause problems. So it should also be observed. And prolonged apnea, this already I said, like if there is atypical pseudocholinesterase, which might cannot degrade the succinylcholine effectively, due to which succinylcholine will be staying for longer time in the body, which can cause a respiratory depression and this prolonged apnea. Increased intragastric pressure can also happen, because of which the patient might feel nausea or vomiting. And rise in intraocular pressure, this might be like because of the because it is also affecting the choroidal vessels. It might be the cause. Coming to muscle soreness, because like there are continuous twitching and fasciculation in the starting. After all of this happened, the patient might feel the muscle soreness, pain in the muscles. Now coming to synergists and antagonists of the depolarizing blockers. Neostigmine, it potentiates phase 1 blocker. We saw two blockades, but here in phase 1 block, usually what neostigmine does, it will antagonize the skeletal muscle relaxants. But here, phase 1 block, it potentiates, because that succinylcholine is also like acting like an acetylcholine there. Hypothermia. In hypothermia conditions, it potentiates action of acetylcholine normally. So in phase 1 block, it might act like the succinylcholine itself. So hypothermia potentiates action. And calcium channel blockers, these also enhance neuromuscular blockade. And new duration of action of succinylcholine is increased in infants below 1 year and patients having any collagen disease, thyrotoxicosis, burns, and genetic deficiency of pseudocholinesterase, like the atypical pseudocholinesterase. Coming to therapeutic uses of neuromuscular blocking drugs, they are used as like an adjuvant to general anesthesia to provide skeletal muscle relaxation during any abdominal or thoracic surgery, and also can be used for the endotracheal intubation. It counteract the laryngospasm during barbiturate anesthesia and to prevent any reflex muscle contractions during surgeries. And also it can be used to prevent trauma during electroconvulsive therapy. Electroconvulsive therapy is the shock therapy you must have seen in movies, kind of like where the patients will be given shock for psychiatric treatment. That's due to during this process, to avoid any trauma, it can be given trauma to the patient. And also can be used for reduction of fractures and orthopedic manipulations. Here also, the skeletal muscle relaxants can be given. And in different spastic conditions like tetanus, status epilepticus also can be given. And to control any ventilation, like if there is an obstructive airway, the patient cannot take the breathing properly, it can be given for controlling the ventilation, for proper ventilation. Now coming to centrally acting muscle relaxants. Also, these also comes under spasmolytics. These drugs reduce the skeletal muscle tone by a selective action in the cerebrospinal axis without altering any consciousness. So here, these centrally active muscle relaxants, once again, let's go through the classification. There are like 5 groups under this: mephenecin group, benzodiazepine group, GABA derivative, central alpha-2 agonist, and miscellaneous agents. First, mephenecin group. This mechanism of this group of drugs is not well, not well observed, cannot be determined, like it cannot be determined. These drugs are believed to be acting at the level of brainstem, and it inhibits only polysynaptic reflexes, not affecting monosynaptic tendon reflexes like knee jerk. And polysynaptic means multiple synapses, like from the central nervous system to the muscle while the nerve is coming. If it has multiple synapses, it is called polysynaptic. These mephenecin group are usually used in like any spasm caused by, pain is caused by spondylitis, sprains, lumbago. This mephenecin group of drugs can be given, and adverse drug reactions of these drugs are sedation and gastrointestinal upset. Now, those drugs which are coming under the mephenecin group are carisoprodol, chlorzoxazone, chlormazanone, methocarbamol. Carisoprodol, it has a medium duration of action, 4 to 6 hours, and it is also acting as analgesic, antipyretic, and it has also anti-muscarinic effect. And chlorzoxazone, it has a longer duration of action, like 8 to 12 hours, but slow onset of action, like it starts slowly, 1.5 hour, because like other drugs in this group starts their action within 30 minutes or so. It is taking considerably longer than other drugs in its group. It is orally better tolerated. This drug you can see in very our daily over-the-counter medications also. There is a combination like with aceclofenac. You can see that tablet strip if you see go to any pharmacy. This chlorzoxazone is given in tablet form along with the aceclofenac. And chlormazanone, this has some hypnotic effect. And then methocarbamol, this undergoes for very extensive first pass metabolism. So it is not given orally, instead it is given IV. Coming to benzodiazepine group, this benzodiazepine group of drugs are diazepam and clonazepam, which can be used as skeletal muscle relaxants. This probably facilitates the GABA-A mediated presynaptic inhibition of release of excitatory neurotransmitters. In this diagram here, this is the part which is again magnified. What is happening is here, this is a neuron. This is GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Glutamate is a excitatory transmitter. So this gives the stimulus for the contraction. This will be giving this GABA, like when it is enough, it will be giving this, it will be inhibiting this action potential. This is the normal pathway. But here what happens is these benzodiazepines, this might act on this GABA-A receptors, and they inhibit, they acts on this action potential which is being created by this glutamate and inhibits it, so that the signal won't be passing to the muscle. This impulse will not be passing to the muscle, and due to which contraction will not be happening. relaxation will happen and the paralysis will happen. That is the mechanism of action of benzodiazepines. These inhibit both monosynaptic and polysynaptic reflexes. The therapeutic use of this group of drugs is normally used in spinal injuries, tetanus, and rheumatic disorders associated with muscle spasm. Major side effect of this group of drugs is sedation. This GABA derivative, baclofen drug, it is an orally active GABA mimetic drug. And we saw what is GABA. This is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. This is GABA mimetic. It is mimicking the GABA. Acts as GABA agonist at GABA B receptor. Earlier we saw benzodiazepines acting on GABA A receptors. Now this baclofen is acting on GABA B receptors. It will mimic the GABA, and what will do? It inhibits the action potential. So due to which it hyperpolarizes neurons by increasing the potassium conductance and decreasing the calcium conductance. And calcium is an important mineral in the skeletal muscle contraction. That contraction, excitation, coupling needs this calcium. Therapeutic uses of baclofen, it is used to relieve painful spasticity in multiple sclerosis and to relieve spasticity due to spinal injuries. And it is also used as an important substitute to treat trigeminal neuralgia and tardive dyskinesia. Coming to adverse drug reactions, it causes sedation, drowsiness, muscle weakness, ataxia. And the drug, when it is being used, if it is suddenly withdrawn, like it can cause anxiety, tachycardia, hallucinations in the patient. So the drug should be gradually tapered, should not be suddenly taken off. And it is a teratogenic drug. It might affect the child, so should not be given in pregnant women. Coming to central alpha-2 agonist, the drug is tizanidine. This inhibits the release of excitatory amino acids in spinal interneurons. Here in the diagram, here see this tizanidine. This is the alpha-2 receptor. It will act on this alpha-2 receptor, and what this alpha-2 receptor does is it inhibits this glutamate to go and cause this action potential. This is the excitatory neurotransmitter, right? It is inhibiting here itself, due to which the release of glutamate will not be happening, due to which that action potential will not be generating. So that's how the central alpha-2 agonist tizanidine acts, and it inhibits the release of excitatory amino acids in spinal interneurons, as we saw in the diagram. That excitatory amino acid is glutamate. And therapeutic uses of this drug is, these are widely used in the treatment of multiple sclerosis, also used in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, spasticity due to neurological disorders and of spinal origin. And coming to adverse drug reactions, it might cause drowsiness, dry mouth, asthenia, and sometimes hypotension. This is a miscellaneous group coming under this centrally acting. It is tolperisone HCl, centrally acting muscle relaxant with local anesthetic properties. It inhibits reticulospinal reflex facilitation without affecting any cortical functions. This drug is well absorbed from small intestine. Peak plasma concentration occurs half an hour to 1 hour after ingestion, with plasma half-life 1.5 hours to 2 hours. And bioavailability is 20% due to extensive first-pass metabolism. So it is indicated in acute muscle or musculoskeletal spasm in adults. The dose of the drug is 150 milligrams 3 times a day alone or in combination with diclofenac sodium 50 milligrams. And this is the indication. This is contraindicated in myasthenia gravis and any perioperative conditions in coronary artery bypass graft surgery, that is CABG. It is absolutely contraindicated, and patients of peptic ulcer and bronchial asthma, here also we should not use this drug. So here, directly acting muscle relaxant, it is dantrolene. This dantrolene acts directly on the muscle. It is not acting anywhere here, not on any neurons, any excitatory neurotransmitters. It is directly acting on the muscle itself. So this dantrolene is a phenytoin analog. It acts directly at the contractile mechanisms of voluntary muscle by reducing depolarization, induced calcium release from sarcoplasmic reticulum. This we know that calcium is important in this contraction excitation coupling. And this calcium will not be like that induced calcium release from sarcoplasmic reticulum is reduced. What is the therapeutic use of dantrolene? It is used to treat spasticity resulting from upper motor UMN means upper motor neuron lesions such as those in spinal cord injury, multiple sclerosis, and cerebral palsy. And also it is used in neuroleptic syndrome. The drug of choice, it is also a drug of choice in the treatment of malignant hyperthermia. As we already saw previously, malignant hyperthermia is a genetically inherited condition, autosomal dominant trait. Here what happens is there is a mutation of calcium release channel in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Due to this mutation, what happens is, like if we are giving a, let's say succinylcholine, there is a persistent release of calcium happening in this succinylcholine depolarization. What happens due to this? There is a massive muscle contraction, the fasciculations twitching continuously, due to which this lactic acid production will be happening, due to which there will be increased heat production from the skeletal muscle. That is a hyperthermia, malignant hyperthermia, increasing temperature, that is heat production. So this condition should be treated immediately by dantrolene given intravenously, starting with 1 milligram per kg and repeating if necessary to a maximum of 10 milligrams per kg. This should be treated immediately. And coming to dantrolene, it is orally poorly absorbed, but though it is poorly absorbed, it is consistent, due to which the plasma levels are proportional to the dose which is given. And plasma half-life of the drug is 9 to 12 hours. Major adverse drug reactions are generalized muscle weakness. Why this generalized muscle weakness happens is, here it is directly acting on the muscle, but the impulses from the central nervous system will be coming, like it is giving instructions to contract the muscle, but the muscle is not releasing any calcium, due to which the muscle will not be contracting. So what happens after that? Due to this continuous opposition between both, it might cause the generalized muscle weakness, and then sedation can also happen, diarrhea, and occasionally hepatitis after prolonged use of the drug. Now coming to miscellaneous group of skeletal muscle relaxants. This miscellaneous group contains quinine, botulinum toxins A and B, gabapentin, progabide, riluzole, hydroxylamide. This quinine, how it acts is it decreases the excitability of the motor end plate on that neuron, due to which the contraction will not be happening. And gabapentin, this gabapentin and progabalin, both are GABA receptor agonists, but gabapentin is GABA B receptor agonist, but progabalin is both GABA A and GABA B receptor agonist. And in previous slides, we saw in the diagram how like it is acting on the GABA A and GABA B receptors. What happens if drugs act on the GABA A and GABA B receptors? So they act on the GABA and they will inhibit the action potential, due to which that skeletal muscle relaxation will be happening. Now drugs, riluzole, hydroxylamide. Riluzole and hydroxylamide are newer drugs, and this riluzole is acting by decreasing glutamatergic transmission in CNS. Glutamatergic means like that glutamate we saw, this is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It is decreased, due to which like it inhibits the voltage dependent sodium channel. This is how it is going to act, and it is used in ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and hydroxylamide is also being used in hydroxylamide, like in ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It inhibits release of calcium from sarcoplasmic reticulum. This mechanism of action is different from riluzole. This is how it acts, and it can be used in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And now botulinum toxins A and B. Botulinum type A and B. These are neurotoxins. These are produced by Clostridium botulinum, which is a spore forming anaerobic bacillus. This botulinum toxin A prevents calcium dependent release of acetylcholine. Like in the neuron, there are vesicles, right? I showed in the like starting slides. Those vesicles containing this acetylcholine. This acetylcholine will be like should be like stored in that vesicle and then be released. But this is dependent on a calcium, like calcium dependent release will be happening. This botulinum toxin A will prevent that calcium dependent release, because of which acetylcholine will not be released and the impulse, like that action potential will not be forming. Coming to botulinum toxin B, how it is acting is it cleaves the synaptic vesicle, the synaptic vesicle associated membrane protein, BAMP, also called synaptobrevin. This synaptobrevin, which is responsible for fusion of synaptic vesicle to presynaptic membrane, means it should like attach to the presynaptic membrane and then vesicle break, and the acetylcholine should be released in the synapse. But what's happening here is botulinum toxin B is cleaving this where the vesicle associated membrane protein, due to which it will not be released effectively. Now coming to botulinum toxin A uses. It is used in strabismus, blepharospasm, and temporary improvement in the wrinkles of face in adult patients. This is quite a common cosmetic thing happening these days. And botulinum toxin B is used in cervical dystonia if it is not being uh, responding to botulinum toxin A. Coming to adverse drug, the different adverse drug reactions for the botulinum toxin A and toxin B. Xerostomia, this is affecting the mouth, and facial weakness, numbness, speech disorders, local injection site pain, the pain at the injection site, dizziness, vertigo, dry eyes, and corneal ulceration due to reduced blinking, because but as we saw, like for the Brinkles, it was, or like it for the blepharospasm and like strabismus, it will be given there, due to which there can be reduced blinking, which can expose the eyes to for longer time, due to which the corneal ulceration can happen. Now coming to nursing implications. Now skeletal muscle relaxations, primarily they are administered by anesthesiologist or under their direct observation. So like only freshly prepared solutions should be used. You should see that whatever drug you are taking is like freshly prepared, because succinylcholine will get rapidly hydrolyzed if it is an older solution. So it will affect the patient. So you should see it is freshly prepared solution you are taking. And if it is even mildly discolored, you should not be used. And baseline renal function test and serum electrolytes should be done. Very important. Why? Because like serum electrolytes, if like there is any differences in like potassium, magnesium, etc., it will affect the drug, the drug action. Um, that's why like baseline serum electrolytes should be taken, and it should be normal. And also renal function test, like in renal function test, like we saw the elimination happens through the renal system for the peripheral muscle relaxation. So if any problem is there in renal function, it will be difficult for the elimination of the drugs. So like we should depending on the renal function test, the anesthesiologist may decide to take another drug which doesn't involve the renal system. And facilities for emergency endotracheal intubation, artificial respiration, and assisted or controlled respiration with oxygen should be available readily in emergency conditions. So these facilities you like should be seen to be available at the operation theater, and monitor vital signs, and see like if the patient is respiration is being maintained, if there are any he is going into any respiratory depression. And here another thing is like monitor for any adverse effects. These are all we went through the class, until now we saw different adverse effects which you should keep in mind, and clinically also you should apply. You should see if the patient is taking that particular drug, is there any possible adverse effect, like if it is happening. And also we saw for like how the muscle paralysis is starting from smaller to larger muscles, then intercostal, then diaphragm. And in case of direct no depolarize uh, depolarizing blocker, you saw how it is affecting differently, like the fasciculations are happening in chest muscles and abdominal muscles. This you should observe. Okay, this chest and abdomen muscles first started twitching, later it will move on. That paralysis will be starting from like face, later limbs, like that. In you should observe the uh, path, like however we studied. That's it. And with this, I'm ending this class. Hope you understood. Study well, and if any doubts, you can comment below the video. Thank you.